Ron DeSantis insists Florida is thriving, but empty beaches, shuttered storefronts, and plummeting visitor numbers tell a different story. Beneath the surface of polished press releases, the state's tourism engine is sputtering, dragged down by political fallout and international backlash. The March 2025 leak of Trump's parasites remark about European allies and his public endorsement sparked outrage abroad. Canada and Europe didn't just respond with words.
If you're fed up with the political games tearing Britain apart, now's the time to stand up. Subscribe now and join a growing community demanding truth, accountability, and leadership that actually listens. We break the stories the mainstream won't touch, and we do it for you. This is our country. Let's take it back together. Subscribe now.
They issued travel warnings. Tourists stayed away, and Florida, long reliant on their dollars, was left holding the bag. The damage is deeper than lost hotel bookings. This collapse has rippled across Florida's economy, slashing jobs in hospitality, shrinking revenues for small towns, and gutting local services. The Canadian snowbirds, once a dependable seasonal lifeline, have cut back their visits by over 10%. Add in visa delays, a strong dollar, and a climate of hostility, and the result isn't just a Florida problem, it's a national one. This is a crisis shaped by political choices, where rhetoric collides with reality, and the cost is paid in livelihoods and lost global trust. Florida's economy is unraveling, and no, this isn't hyperbole. This is the raw, uncomfortable truth that the headlines refuse to say out loud. For all the speeches and press conferences coming from Governor Ron DeSantis's office, proudly boasting about record tourism, the reality on the ground tells a very different story. Florida is in free fall. Tourism, the backbone of Florida's economy, is collapsing under the weight of political arrogance, diplomatic recklessness, and an all-out war on facts. Yes, there are people still arriving at airports. Yes, some beaches still see foot traffic, but the numbers that matter, the dollars spent, the nights booked, the jobs retained, are down. Way down. Hotels are running at half capacity. Restaurants that once had wait lists now beg for customers. Theme parks are scaling back hours, and small businesses that depend on seasonal income are closing permanently. The heart of the problem isn't economics, it's political. In March 2025, a private message leak from the Trump administration revealed one of the most damaging diplomatic blunders in recent memory. Top White House officials were caught referring to European allies as parasites. The president didn't walk it back. He doubled down. He endorsed it publicly. And just like that, decades of diplomatic goodwill collapsed into a pile of nationalist bravado and international outrage. The response was immediate. European governments issued travel advisories warning their citizens about visiting the U.S. Canadian authorities followed suit, and for Florida, the consequences were catastrophic. The state's economy depends on those tourists, especially the Canadian snowbirds, retirees who spend months in Florida every year, pumping billions into local economies. That flow, it's slowing to a trickle. Tourism from Canada is down by double digits. The Canadian snowbirds are staying home or shifting their winter plans to friendlier destinations, Mexico, the Caribbean, even Portugal. Not because Florida got more expensive, not because of weather, but because they're being told, loud and clear, that they're not welcome anymore. When a president brands America's allies as parasites, people listen, and they take their money elsewhere. The ripple effects are brutal. Over 35,000 jobs in Florida's hospitality sector are gone. Restaurants are shuttering. Hotels are laying off staff. And it doesn't end there. Local farmers who sell produce to hotels and restaurants are taking hits. Seafood suppliers, truckers, construction firms, building short-term rental properties. Every link in the chain is breaking. And with every business closure, every job lost, Local governments lose tax revenue. That means cuts to schools, emergency services, sanitation, and infrastructure. The social contract is breaking down. Evictions are rising. Food insecurity is spreading. And still, the state leadership insists everything is fine because they're counting arrivals, not economic activity. The official stats? They include every person crossing into Florida, regardless of whether they're tourists, migrant workers, or someone just passing through. It's a metric designed to mislead, because while bodies may be entering the state, wallets are closing. There's a gaping disconnect between the official narrative and economic reality, and the numbers don't lie. International tourism is projected to drop by 4.5 million visitors across the U.S. in 2025. Florida is absorbing the worst of that hit. An estimated $64 billion in tourism revenue is expected to evaporate this year, and Florida, the supposed tourism powerhouse, is dragging the rest of the country down with it. This isn't a weather event. It's not an economic cycle. It's a man-made disaster, one driven by a blend of aggressive nationalism, policy incompetence, and diplomatic tone deafness. The global community heard the rhetoric coming from the White House, and they responded with silence. Silence in bookings, silence in flights, silence in hotel reservations. Airlines are slashing routes. Travel agencies in Canada and Europe are rerouting business to safer, friendlier places. Flights to Miami, Orlando, and Tampa are being cut. That's not just a scheduling issue, that's billions in future revenue walking out the door. And yet, as the economic pain deepens, the response from Florida's leadership has been either silence or spin. They've floated token measures like the so-called Canadian Snowbirds Act, a band-aid meant to look like a solution, but these superficial fixes don't touch the real issue. You cannot legislate respect. You can't fix a hostile environment with bureaucratic workarounds. You either create a culture of welcome or you suffer the consequences of exclusion. And right now, Florida is suffering because the message coming from the top, from DeSantis to Trump, isn't one of openness. It's one of closed doors, tight borders, and nationalist bravado. That might win applause at rallies, but it kills economies that rely on global trust. What's even more damaging is how these policies undermine America's global brand. For generations, the U.S. sold itself as the land of opportunity, of adventure, of welcome. That image took decades to build. It took months to destroy. The fallout is already visible, and it's only going to get worse. Major international events, the Ryder Cup, the FIFA World Cup, even the Olympics, are being reevaluated by sponsors and attendees alike. Because why would a nation insult its allies and expect them to show up, cheer, and spend money? And let's be clear, this isn't just a Florida story. It's a national crisis. Florida is the symptom. The disease is deeper. The erosion of international trust, the rise of isolationist rhetoric, and the systematic dismantling of diplomacy have created a hostile business environment that repels investment and tourism alike. Visa delays, sky-high travel costs due to a strong dollar, and unpredictable immigration enforcement all add to the mess. Visitors don't want to feel like suspects. They want to feel like guests. And America has lost that distinction. What's more, the metrics being used to downplay this crisis are flawed by design. Counting how many people enter the state does nothing to measure their economic impact. A day tripper spending $20 is not the same as a snowbird dropping $20,000 over 3 months. But Florida's leaders lump them together to mask the truth. The money is gone. The confidence is gone. The future is in jeopardy. What we're seeing now is a social and economic feedback loop spiraling downward. Bad rhetoric fuels bad headlines. Those headlines go global. Perceptions harden. Tourists avoid. Businesses shrink. Jobs vanish. Services get cut. Communities unravel. And as that cycle intensifies, even the most loyal supporters start asking questions. Not political questions, survival questions. How do I pay rent when the resort lays me off? Where do I get food when the pantry is empty? What happens to my kids when their school loses funding? This is the cost of performative politics, the price of treating allies like enemies, of using international diplomacy as a punchline. Florida is ground zero for this economic backlash, and it's becoming a cautionary tale. This isn't about party lines, it's about economic reality, a reality that can't be spun away with press conferences and manipulated statistics. There is still a narrow window for recovery, but it doesn't start with legislation. It starts with leadership. Leadership willing to say, we messed up. Leadership willing to stop demonizing allies. Leadership willing to admit that tourists don't want to vacation where they're not welcome. The world is watching. Tourists have choices. And right now, they're choosing anywhere but Florida. If you're tired of the gaslighting, if you're ready for accountability, and if you want to keep getting the facts unfiltered, like this video, share it with someone who still thinks the economy is fine and hit subscribe. This isn't over. We'll be here, exposing every lie until the truth is impossible to ignore. The economic crisis unfolding in Florida is not a storm that blew in, it's a storm that was invited, built brick by brick through reckless politics, corrosive rhetoric, and deliberate disregard for reality. What's happening in Florida now is the direct consequence of decisions made at the highest levels of power. This isn't a mystery. This isn't a shock. It's a self-inflicted wound. And the rest of the country should pay attention because Florida isn't an outlier. It's a warning. Governor Ron DeSantis continues to push the illusion of prosperity. He claims the state is booming. He holds up cherry-picked statistics about airport arrivals, beach traffic, or short-term real estate surges as proof that Florida is winning. But when you zoom in past the headlines, what you find is decline. What you find is empty hotel rooms, vanishing service jobs, collapsing small businesses, and a tourism industry bleeding from every direction. The numbers are brutal. Revenue down 30% in major tourist hotspots. Over 35,000 hospitality jobs lost in under a year. Restaurants that thrived for decades, gone. Tours, charters, family-run attractions, gone. This isn't seasonal fluctuation. This is systemic collapse, and it's being driven by one thing above all else: politics. When the Trump administration's internal messages were leaked in March 2025, the world saw what American allies were really thought of: parasites. That was the word used by senior officials to describe Canada, Germany, France, nations that have stood beside the U.S. through war, peace, economic disaster, and recovery. And instead of walking it back, President Trump embraced it. He repeated it publicly. He called it accurate. Diplomatically, it was a slap across the face. Economically, it was a gut punch. Because when your government insults its closest allies on the world stage, those allies don't just shake their heads and move on. They respond, and they did. Canadian and European governments issued travel advisories, not for hurricanes, not for safety concerns, but because of political hostility, because of the climate of arrogance, suspicion, and xenophobia that now defines American discourse. Those governments told their citizens, you might want to think twice before going there. They did think twice, and they chose not to go. Canadian snowbirds, once a reliable pillar of Florida's winter economy, pulled back. Retirees who used to spend 3 to 5 months in the state fueling local economies with long-term spending stayed home. They didn't want to risk being targeted. They didn't want to fund a state where their country was insulted from the podium. Their absence was immediate and massive, a 10 to 16% drop in Canadian tourism in a matter of months. And it's not just hotels that felt it. Grocery stores, pharmacies, golf courses, local clinics, real estate agencies. Every part of the Florida economy that relies on long-term seasonal visitors is now feeling the vacuum. And yet, Florida leadership pretends nothing's wrong. They point to residential growth and domestic visitors to make up the gap. But a family driving down from Georgia for a weekend is not the same as a Canadian couple spending $30,000 across 4 months. You can't fill an economic crater with sand. Meanwhile, the international perception of the United States as a whole is deteriorating. America used to be seen as a place of openness, of ambition and excitement. That global brand brought not just tourists, but students, investors, filmmakers, athletes, and business leaders. Now, it brings concern. And as that perception shifts, so does behavior. Tour operators in Europe are rerouting customers to Portugal, Greece, and Morocco. Canadian travel agencies are redirecting retirees to Mexico, Belize, and the Dominican Republic. Airlines are slashing U.S. routes, starting with Florida. That's not theoretical. That's happening right now. And let's talk about how this affects the future. The United States is set to host the FIFA World Cup, the Ryder Cup, and the Summer Olympics in the next few years. These events don't just rely on ticket sales, they depend on international enthusiasm. But how do you sell tickets to fans whose countries were just insulted? How do you promote events in a country where visitors are warned they might face hostility? This isn't just about Florida's beaches, it's about the national economy. International tourism is a $200 billion industry for the U.S., and if trends continue, 2025 will see a $64 billion hit to that figure. That's not pocket change. That's an economic earthquake with aftershocks in every state. The worst part? The response from lawmakers has been superficial at best. Take the Canadian Snowbirds Act. It's a pathetic attempt to look responsive, an empty gesture meant to create the illusion of action. But it does nothing to address the real issue. The rhetoric coming from political leaders is toxic. And no amount of visa tinkering or residency exceptions can fix the damage done by openly insulting America's most loyal allies. The crisis isn't logistical, it's cultural. And while the losses mount, so does the resentment. Communities that once thrived on tourism are crumbling. Property taxes are spiking to make up for lost revenue. Emergency services are being defunded. Public workers are being laid off. Food banks are overwhelmed. Eviction notices are piling up. The social fabric that held these communities together, gone. Florida's economy wasn't built on oil or finance or tech. It was built on hospitality, on being welcoming, on creating experiences that people around the world wanted to return to. Now it's built on exclusion, grievance, and denial, and it's failing. People want to feel safe and respected when they travel. They want to know they're entering a place where they're valued, not just tolerated. But the message from Trump, DeSantis, and others has been loud and clear. If you're not from here, don't expect much from us. That's not pride. That's poison. And the economic effects are now undeniable. We have a system where misleading statistics are being used to keep up appearances. Total visitor numbers are being inflated with domestic arrivals, business travelers, and pass-throughs, while actual revenue, job retention, and consumer activity plummet. It's a shell game, and it's falling apart. The longer leaders pretend everything is fine, the harder the landing becomes. Because this isn't just a temporary dip. This is a fundamental shift in perception, behavior, and planning. And if nothing changes, if the rhetoric stays hostile, if the policies stay performative, then this decline becomes permanent. Florida doesn't just risk losing tourists, it risks losing its identity, and the ripple effects won't stop at the state line. When a major American region starts shedding billions, when global events fall short of international attendance, when airlines start rewriting flight maps, every state suffers. The U.S. brand takes a hit. Investment slows, diplomatic cooperation weakens, and global competition tightens. Mexico, the Caribbean, Southeast Asia, these aren't just vacation alternatives. They're destinations ready to steal market share that the U.S. is actively throwing away. And they're doing it with one simple strategy: being welcoming. There's no mystery to this. People go where they're treated with dignity. They spend money where they feel safe. They return to places where they're appreciated. And right now, Florida, and increasingly the United States, is failing that test. The solution isn't complicated, but it's politically inconvenient. Stop the performative hostility. Treat allies like partners, not enemies. Acknowledge that tourism is built on relationships, not just infrastructure. And for God's sake, lead with humility, not nationalism. This is about survival, economic survival. Florida's collapse is not just a local story. It's a national case study in how arrogance and antagonism destroy growth. And it should terrify anyone who cares about America's future in the global economy. Florida is bleeding, not just from bad numbers, but from bad leadership. And the silence from the top is deafening. Ron DeSantis won't admit that his state is in freefall. He won't tell the thousands of laid-off hospitality workers why their livelihoods disappeared. He won't face the small business owners drowning in debt as international foot traffic dries up. Instead, he hides behind photo ops and cherry-picked data, pretending the collapse isn't happening. But it is happening, and everyone living it knows the truth. When you poison the well of international goodwill, you don't just lose tourists, you lose trust, you lose reputation, you lose relevance, and that loss spreads faster than any press release can cover it up. The Canadian snowbirds may have been the first to leave, but they won't be the last. America's greatest export was never just products. It was the promise of being a place the world wanted to come to. That promise is now being broken in real time. The economy doesn't care about culture wars. It cares about perception, about access, about respect. Right now, Florida offers none of that. What happens next depends entirely on whether leaders wake up or keep sleepwalking their state and the country into deeper decline. You want the truth that they won't admit on cable news? You're getting it here. So if you're not ready to settle for propaganda, if you're done watching America undermine itself, like this video, share it and subscribe. This is far from over, and we're not done telling the story.